A blind veteran walked into the K9 Rehabilitation Center, hoping to find a gentle guide dog. Instead, he stopped in front of the kennel of the most dangerous retired police dog ever. Recorded. Aggressive, untrainable, impossible to rehome. But when the dog sensed him, something unbelievable happened. What happened next shocked everyone. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The retired K9 facility sat far from a city, quiet in a way that felt intentional. No signs pointed to it from a road. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and old concrete, and every sound echoed longer than it should. At the far end of the kennel row was a space no one lingered near. A red tag hung on the gate. Not a warning you explain to visitors, one you expect professionals to understand. The staff spoke about that kennel in lowered voices, as if volume alone might wake something dangerous. The dog inside had a reputation that came before him. Former elite K9. Multiple incident reports after retirement. Handlers rotated and refused reassignment. Training sessions ended early. Meals were delivered without eye contact. The official language used words like unpredictable and high risk. The unofficial language was simpler. Don't go near him. He wasn't sick. He wasn't starving. He was intact, powerful, and always alert. The kind of animal that watched everything and trusted nothing. The kind that made experienced officers tighten their grip without realizing it. No one said the word, but everyone understood it. Dogs like this didn't stay long. Resources ran out. Options narrowed. Files grew thin. Decisions were made in rooms far from kennels. The reason he was still there had less to do with mercy and more to do with paperwork. Reviews delayed, assessments postponed. Someone always asking for one more week. Not hope, just time. Each day that passed felt like borrowed space, and everyone knew borrowed things eventually had to be returned. That morning, a name appeared on the intake sheet that didn't belong. A request logged by reception, then flagged by security. Not a handler, not an adopter, not a trainer. A blind veteran asking to meet the dog no one would touch. Staff gathered near the office, reading and rereading the request, searching for a mistake. There wasn't one. The question settled heavy in the room, unanswered and uncomfortable. Why would a man who couldn't see ask for the most dangerous dog in the building? He arrived without ceremony. No escort, no announcement. The veteran stepped through the front doors with a measured pace, counting space with a quiet confidence of someone who had learned to navigate the world again. A white cane traced the floor lightly, never rushed, never tentative. His jacket was plain, worn at the cuffs. Dark glasses hid eyes that no longer served him, but his posture told a different story. Straight-backed, balanced, disciplined. The kind of stillness that comes from training, not comfort. Conversations softened as he passed. People noticed, then stopped staring. At the desk, he gave his name and waited. He didn't fidget. He didn't explain himself. When the receptionist asked if he needed assistance, he shook his head once. "I'm fine," he said, voice calm even. Not polite reassurance, fact. A folder slid across the counter. He didn't reach for it. He listened as the details were read aloud, absorbing dates and disclaimers with the same focus he used to read rooms. When asked which dog he wished to meet, he answered immediately. No pause. No uncertainty. He said the name clearly, as if it had never left him. The room reacted before anyone spoke. A glance exchanged. A chair scraping back. Someone exhaled under their breath. The supervisor asked him to confirm. He did. Again. Same name. Same steady tone. There was no bravado in it, no challenge. Just intention. "I understand the risks," he added, not as a plea, but as acknowledgement. He stood where he was, hands relaxed at his sides, waiting for the next question. It didn't come. Instead, there was a silence that stretched, filled with everything the staff already knew about the dog. When the supervisor finally spoke, it was careful. "May I ask why?" The veteran tilted his head slightly, listening to the room rather than the words. "Because he deserves to be met," he said. "Not rescued." Not fixed. Met. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Outside the kennel wing, a red tag swayed faintly on a gate as air moved through the corridor. The request was logged. The meeting approved. And as the veteran followed the sound of footsteps down the hall, the unease deepened into a single unsettled thought. This man hadn't come by accident. They didn't take him down the hall right away. Instead, they led him into a small briefing room that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. The door closed softly, but the tension inside sharpened. A supervisor laid a folder on the table and opened it without drama. Incident reports. Behavioral notes. Dates highlighted in yellow. The language stayed professional, but the meaning was clear. The dog had bitten after retirement. Lunged without warning. Required isolation. We don't let visitors near him, the supervisor said carefully. Not anymore. The veteran listened without interruption. He didn't lean forward. He didn't ask questions meant to argue. He absorbed the information the way soldiers absorb weather reports. Useful, not personal. Another staff member spoke up, voice tight. We've had handlers refuse reassignment. Training sessions end early. Even feeding requires precautions. Someone added, if this goes wrong, it goes wrong fast. The room waited for a reaction. Fear. Doubt. Second thoughts. None came. The veteran nodded once, acknowledging the risk like a known fact, not a deterrent that a waiver was placed in front of him. The words were read aloud, line by line. Injury. Liability. Permanent harm. The kind of language designed to make people reconsider. He held out his hand and signed where they guided him, steady and precise. No tremor. No hesitation. When the supervisor asked if he wanted more time, he shook his head. I don't need it, he said. His voice wasn't brave. It was settled, as if the decision had been made long before the building, the paperwork, or the warnings existed. The supervisor exhaled slowly. Once we open that gate, he said, we can't guarantee anything. The veteran adjusted his grip on the cane, listening past the words to the corridor beyond. Somewhere down the hall, metal shifted. A low sound carried through the concrete. Movement, breath, awareness. I understand, he replied. Not dismissive. Complete. Chairs scraped back. A door unlocked. And as they stood to leave, a final warning followed him into the hallway. Unspoken, but heavy. Everyone expected this meeting to end badly. The corridor narrowed as they moved forward, the sound changing with every step. Concrete replaced tile. Air grew colder. The veteran felt it immediately. His cane tapped slower now, measuring space he couldn't see. Somewhere ahead, metal rattled. A deep, violent bark exploded without warning, slamming into the hallway like a physical force. Handlers stopped instantly. One reached for a restraint reflexively. The dog threw his weight against the kennel door, the impact ringing sharp and metallic. Teeth snapped. Breath thundered. This was not fear. This was rage, contained only by steel. The veteran did not flinch. He stopped where he was told, shoulders squared, chin lifted slightly as if listening for more than sound. The barking came again, louder, closer, echoing off the walls. The dog slammed the door a second time, harder, faster, muscles working in a pattern born from years of training and conflict. Staff exchanged looks. One whispered, "This is why we warned you." Another adjusted their stance, ready to end it. The tension wasn't emotional. It was procedural. Everyone here had seen how fast this could turn. The gate was still closed, but the presence was undeniable. The dog paced now, nails scraping concrete, breath ragged. A low growl vibrated through the floor, steady and deliberate. The veteran felt it through his boots. He shifted his weight, but did not retreat. His hand rested lightly on the cane, not gripping it like a weapon or shield. His breathing stayed slow, measured. To anyone watching, it looked reckless. A blind man standing feet away from an animal labeled uncontrollable, with nothing but sound and instinct between them. Then the handlers froze, because the barking changed. Not stopped, but altered. The rhythm broke. The growl faltered, rising and falling unevenly, as if the dog was recalculating something it hadn't expected. Pacing slowed. The violent impact stopped. Silence didn't return, But chaos softened into uncertainty. No commands were given. No movements made. In that suspended moment, every person in the corridor understood the same thing at once. This meeting hadn't gone as predicted, and whatever happened next would decide everything. The handlers waited for the next surge, the next violent lunge they had learned to expect. It didn't come. Instead, the sound changed again, shorter breaths, uneven, as if the dog was pulling itself back from the edge. The veteran tilted his head slightly, listening past the noise. He didn't speak yet. He let the space settle. The dog paced once more, slower this time, nails clicking with less urgency. A low whine slipped out, brief and involuntary, and the room went still. The veteran inhaled, steady and controlled, then spoke a single word. Not loud, not commanding, just precise. It wasn't a standard shelter cue or a correction. It sounded older, shaped by repetition and trust rather than authority. The effect was immediate and unmistakable. The pacing stopped. The growl cut off mid-vibration, like a switch flipped inside the dog's chest. Heads turned. One handler's hand hovered, unsure whether to intervene or not. The dog pressed his nose to the bars, breathing fast, confused. Another word followed. Same tone, same cadence. The veteran hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved closer. Yet the dog reacted as if distance no longer mattered. He sniffed deeply, pulling air through his nose in sharp, searching bursts. His ears shifted back, not in submission, but concentration. The rigid posture softened by degrees so small they were almost missed. This wasn't obedience. It was recognition struggling to surface through layers of stress and memory. The handlers exchanged looks, tension sharpening into disbelief. They had tried commands, conditioning, controlled exposure. None of it had broken through. And yet here was a response, raw, unfiltered, untrained for this room. The veteran stopped speaking and let the silence do the work. The dog stood perfectly still now, chest rising and falling hard, eyes fixed forward. No more lunging. No more rage. Only a question hanging in the air, unanswered but undeniable. The dog hadn't calmed down because he was controlled. He had paused because he remembered something he wasn't supposed to remember at all. The veteran shifted his weight slowly, careful not to rush the moment. The cane tapped once against the concrete as he folded it inward and set it aside, deliberately, like he was removing armor rather than support. A handler took half a step forward, instinctively ready to stop him. But the veteran raised one hand, calm, steady. He lowered himself to one knee, joint stiff but controlled, placing both palms flat on his thigh. He didn't reach out. He didn't lean in. He simply made himself smaller. The dog reacted immediately. His head tilted, nostrils flaring again, as if the change in height altered the scent map of the room. The rigid tension in his shoulders wavered. He took one cautious step closer to the bars, then stopped, claws scraping softly. The kennel no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a pause. The veteran's breathing was slow and even, measured in a way only someone used to danger could manage. No fear leaked into the air. No challenge either. Silence stretched until it became heavy. The kind of silence that presses on the chest. The handlers barely breathed. The veteran remained still, eyes unfocused behind dark lenses, listening not just to the dog, but to the space between them. He angled his head slightly toward the sound of the dog's breath, aligning himself without seeing. It was a posture born from training, not instinct. One used when sight was useless and trust mattered more than speed. The dog lowered his head a fraction, just enough to notice. The aggressive edge had drained away, replaced by something fragile and unfamiliar. Confusion, yes, but also restraint. The veteran didn't move to claim the moment. He let it exist on its own terms. In that quiet exchange, one kneeling man, one wounded dog, something irreversible began to happen. Not control, not dominance. Respect. The change didn't happen all at once. It came in fragments. A breath released. A shoulder dropping. The dog's tail, once rigid, eased a few inches lower. His growl didn't stop. It thinned, lost its edge, until it was no more than sound, without intent. He shifted his weight from one forepaw to the other, uncertainty replacing aggression. The handlers exchanged looks, careful not to move. They had seen rage before. They had never seen it unravel like this. The dog stepped closer to the bars again, slower now, head lowered as if gravity had increased. His ears twitched at the veteran's breathing, sinking to its steady rhythm. He sniffed once, deeply, then again, committing the scent to memory. The barking stopped completely. In its place came a low, puzzled huff. It wasn't submission. It wasn't obedience. It was recognition trying to surface through years of noise and fear. The veteran sensed it before anyone else. His posture softened without changing shape, a subtle adjustment only someone trained to listen with their whole body could make. He tilted his chin, acknowledging the space the dog had claimed. Still no reaching. Still no command. Just presence. The room felt smaller now, tighter, as if every sound had been pulled toward the kennel. Even the fluorescent lights seemed quieter. Then the dog sat. Not sharply. Not on cue. He folded himself down with care, eyes fixed forward, shoulders squared but calm. It was the posture of a working animal waiting for the next instruction that never came. A handler whispered a curse under his breath, stunned. This had never happened. Not once, not with anyone. The veteran remained kneeling, unmoving. In that shared stillness, the truth settled in. The danger hadn't vanished. It had been understood that no one spoke. No one dared to move. The dog remained seated, body steady, eyes locked forward as if waiting for a signal that no longer existed. The handlers had prepared for violence, spray ready, restraints tight, rehearsed commands on their tongues. Instead, they were watching something far more unsettling. Control returning on its own. Years of reports, bite warnings, and isolation hadn't done this. One man, kneeling in silence, had. The dog leaned forward slightly, nose lifting as he drew in the air again. His breathing slowed, matching the veteran's calm rhythm. The sound that escaped his chest wasn't a growl anymore. It was a low, strained whine, quickly swallowed back, as if he hadn't made that sound in years and didn't know whether he was allowed to. His eyes softened, not pleading, not submissive, searching. Whatever he was looking for, he expected it to be here. The veteran felt it. His shoulders squared, not defensively, but with familiarity. He shifted his weight just enough for the dog to hear the fabric of his jacket move. The reaction was instant. The dog's ears angled forward, then back, processing the sound like a half-remembered command. Muscles that had been coiled for impact finally loosened. This wasn't obedience triggered by training. It was memory surfacing through trauma, slow and fragile. One handler finally exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath the entire time. Another lowered his hand from the restraint without being told. The room understood it together, in the same quiet second. This was the moment everything changed. Not because the dog had become safe, but because the story they told about him was incomplete. He hadn't chosen aggression. He had been trapped inside it. And now, for the first time since his retirement, he wasn't alone inside that cage. The supervisor broke the silence, voice low, careful. Files were pulled from a tablet, dates cross-checked. Deployment notes skimmed without being read aloud. The veteran stood still, hands resting loosely at his sides, as if he already knew what they would find. Years earlier, in a desert training zone far from this kennel, a joint unit had rotated handlers and dogs through rapid drills. Names changed, teams shifted, but scent, cadence, and command structure never did. The veteran spoke for the first time since kneeling. Not a speech, just facts. He had trained alongside K9 units during those rotations, short windows between missions. He never claimed ownership of a dog, never pretended this one was his. He only said he remembered a partner who worked silently, decisively, and never broke formation under pressure. The same pause before movement. The same way of listening before acting. Those details didn't fade with blindness. A handler flipped to an incident report from years back. An explosion during a convoy exercise. Chaos. Smoke. A misread command. The veteran had been pulled from the blast radius by a dog while medics reached him. Vision lost. Careers rerouted. The handler assigned to that dog didn't make it. Afterward, the dog's file changed tone, unpredictable, high risk, non-compliant. Context disappeared. Behavior remained. Grief was mislabeled as danger. The room absorbed it in pieces. No dramatic reveal. No single sentence that tied everything neatly. Just alignment. The dog's reactions. The veteran's calm. The timeline that finally made sense. This wasn't reunion by chance, and it wasn't destiny dressed up as sentiment. It was two survivors recognizing the only constant left, each other's presence. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It settled quietly, heavy enough to change every decision that followed. The report didn't excuse what the dog had done afterward. It explained it. After the incident overseas, he was shipped home without transition, without the handler who understood his signals, without decompression time. The kennel became quieter. Commands changed. Hands smelled different. The dog's world shrank to concrete floors and rotating faces. Each unfamiliar approach tightened the same reflex that once kept soldiers alive. When fear showed up, it was recorded as aggression. Handlers tried standard protocols. They failed. Not because the dog was incapable, but because the context was gone. He wasn't refusing orders. He was guarding against uncertainty. Every lunge was a preemptive defense. Every growl, a warning, learned the hard way. The notes reduced complex behavior into red tags and restrictions. Unadoptable. High risk. The words were easier than admitting they didn't know how to bring him back from where he'd been left. The veteran listened without interruption. He didn't nod. He didn't argue. He understood the pattern because it mirrored his own. After blindness, people raised voices around him, overexplained rooms, rushed his movements. Some days, frustration came out sharp, misunderstood as anger. It took time for others to learn that trauma doesn't announce itself politely. It repeats until someone recognizes the signal beneath the noise. The dog had been repeating his. The supervisor closed the file and looked at the kennel again. The dog hadn't moved. He was still seated, steady, eyes forward, posture neutral. Not sedated. Not restrained by fear. Present. The label dangerous suddenly felt lazy, an ending slapped onto a story that hadn't been finished. What the room saw now wasn't a threat waiting to happen. It was a system failure, corrected too late. And standing right there was the one person who could finish the story without forcing it. They didn't call it a test out loud. No one wanted responsibility if it failed. The supervisor nodded once, slow and deliberate, and a handler eased the secondary latch without opening the gate. The room tightened. This was the line they never crossed. The dog shifted his weight, sensing the change before it happened, but he didn't rise. The veteran stayed still, hands relaxed, breath even, as if the moment had already been decided somewhere else. The handler opened the kennel door a few inches. Enough to invite movement, not enough to force it. The dog leaned forward, stopped, and waited. No lunging. No warning bark. The veteran angled his body slightly, giving space without retreat. He didn't reach out. He didn't speak yet. Silence did the work first. The dog took one step, then another, placing each paw carefully, choosing calm over impulse. A command came next, quiet, precise, unchanged by time. Not loud enough to impress anyone, just clear. The dog paused, processed, and sat again, exactly where the line of the door met the floor. The handlers stared. This wasn't compliance born from correction. It was consent. The dog wasn't being managed. He was participating. Years of failed protocols hadn't produced this posture. Familiar cadence had. The supervisor exhaled. Someone lowered a shoulder they hadn't realized was tense. The dog looked up, not searching for permission, but confirmation. The veteran gave none. He simply stayed present. That was the test. Not whether the dog could behave, but whether trust could exist without control. In that quiet, ordinary moment, the room understood what records never showed. This wasn't a dangerous animal on probation. It was a professional waiting to be treated like one again. Then one gave a command. No signal was offered. The veteran remained exactly where he was, grounded and still, allowing the space between them to exist without pressure. The dog stood quietly, head level, ears relaxed, weighing the moment. This was unfamiliar territory. No leash guidance, no handler tension feeding his instincts. Just presence. After years of being told what not to do, he was being allowed to decide. The room held its breath, understanding the weight of that freedom. The dog took a slow step forward. Then another. Each movement was deliberate, controlled. As if he were crossing a line he had learned never to trust again. He stopped just short of the veteran's knee and lowered his head, not in submission, but acknowledgement. His breathing deepened, steady and calm. The posture said everything reports never captured. This wasn't fear-breaking. It was recognition, settling in, careful and earned, without a single command forcing it. The veteran felt the shift immediately. His hand lifted slightly, not reaching, not searching, just open. The dog leaned in on his own, resting the side of his muzzle against the veteran's fingers for a brief second. That was all. No dramatic gesture. No collapse. Just contact chosen freely. The veteran's jaw tightened, emotion controlled but present. This wasn't reunion. It was agreement. Two professionals acknowledging shared ground after years of silence. Around them, trained officers stood motionless, aware they were witnessing something rare and fragile. The dog stepped back into a neutral stance, calm intact, decision made. He hadn't been coaxed or corrected into trust. He had offered it. That distinction mattered. In that quiet exchange, it became clear the question was no longer whether the dog could be managed. The question now was whether anyone else in the room could understand what he had just done, and respect it enough not to take it away. The supervisor didn't speak right away. He looked at the dog, then at the veteran, then back to the open file in his hands. Years of procedure pressed against a moment that didn't fit any checklist. The dog stood calm beside the threshold, no restraints pulling him back, no tension demanding control. What had just happened couldn't be logged as an anomaly and ignored. It demanded a different response, one that admitted the system had missed something essential. A quiet discussion followed, voices lowered, words chosen carefully. Liability, safety, responsibility, all valid concerns. But so was the evidence in front of them. The dog's posture hadn't changed once. No escalation, no regression. He had regulated himself. That mattered. Experts were called. Notes were amended. The red labels suddenly felt outdated, written for a version of the dog that no longer existed in this room. The veteran listened without interrupting, not pushing, not pleading. When he finally spoke, it was measured. He didn't ask for exceptions. He asked for accuracy. The dog hadn't failed assessments, he said. The assessments had failed to account for loss, separation, and context. He wasn't asking to erase risk. He was asking to redefine it honestly. The room understood the difference. Advocacy didn't sound like demand. It sounded like responsibility. The supervisor closed the folder and nodded once. A reclassification would be initiated. Temporary status reviewed. Oversight assigned. The decision wasn't dramatic, but it was real. The dog remained where he was, steady and patient, as if he'd expected no less. In that moment, something shifted beyond policy. A narrative changed. The dog wasn't being spared. He was being seen correctly. For the first time since the day everything went wrong, the paperwork took weeks, but the change was immediate. Structured routines replaced isolation. The dog moved from the high-security run to a quieter wing, where schedules were consistent and handlers spoke before approaching. The veteran visited regularly, not to test or train, but to be present. The dog learned the sound of his steps, the rhythm of his breathing, the pause before a turn. Calm became habit. Habit became trust, steady and earned. Training didn't restart from scratch. It was reframed. Short walks, clear spaces, predictable cues. The veteran worked with specialists, learning orientation techniques that relied on sound and touch instead of sight. The dog adjusted naturally, pacing himself to the cane's tap, stopping when the veteran stopped, waiting when he waited. No leash tension, no force correction, just alignment. Independence began to return, not loudly, but with each uneventful step. Staff noticed the difference first. Reports shifted from incident logs to progress notes. The dog's body language stayed neutral. Recovery wasn't a miracle, it was consistency. The veteran's posture changed too. Shoulders set, breathing even. He spoke more, but only when necessary. Purpose doesn't announce itself. It shows up in routines that hold. Together, they filled gaps the system had left open, without asking for recognition. On a quiet afternoon, they walked the perimeter path. The dog stayed beside him, not ahead, not behind. Equal distance, equal trust. The veteran paused, feeling the sun on his face, the dog's presence steady at his knee. For the first time in years, neither was being managed. Neither was being labeled. They weren't fixed. They were functional together. And that was enough to move forward one measured step at a time. They left the facility without ceremony. No cameras, no applause, just the sound of a door closing and the quiet rhythm of steps on concrete. The dog walked at the veteran's side, not guided by a leash, not pulled by habit, choosing the position as if it had always belonged there. The veteran adjusted his pace instinctively, trusting the space the dog protected. People they passed noticed the calm first. Then the symmetry. Two figures moving as one, neither leading, neither following. Time did what it does best when allowed to work honestly. The dog learned new boundaries without losing old discipline. The veteran learned routes, corners, and distances with confidence, returning to his voice. Independence wasn't loud or heroic. It was practical. Grocery aisles, crosswalks, morning routines that didn't require assistance. The dog didn't replace the veteran's sight. He replaced uncertainty. In return, the veteran gave him what no training plan ever had: context, patience, and a reason to stay present. Those who once labeled the dog dangerous began using different words: stable, focused, reliable. Not because behavior had been forced into compliance, but because it had been understood. The veteran never corrected them publicly. He knew labels were fragile things. They change when perspective does. The dog didn't need vindication. He needed continuity. He needed one voice that didn't disappear when things went wrong. That was the difference between containment and partnership. On a quiet evening walk, the veteran paused at the curb, listening for traffic. The dog stopped too, body steady, alert without tension. When it was safe, they moved together. Simple, effective, complete. That was the lesson left behind in their wake. Not every problem needs fixing, and not every soul needs saving. Some just need the one person willing to stay. Broken doesn't mean dangerous. Sometimes it just means unfinished. That day, the most feared dog didn't find a home. He found the only person who understood his silence.